Welcome to If Only You Knew, where each week we take a deep dive into the careers and experiences of people from different backgrounds, cultures, countries, and ages to discuss pivotal moments in their lives and the lessons they have learnt along the way.
If they told people the truth, they wouldn't last very long.
Whether you're a school student in an established career, mapping your academic pathway, searching for the perfect career, looking to change careers, or just plain curious, then this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Christy McCormack, and I want to ask you, what would you do differently if only you knew? With me today is Craig Ford. Craig is a cyber security consultant, ethical hacker, security compliance auditor, freelance security journalist, and an Amazon best-selling author who has published 2 books, A Hacker I Am and A Hacker I Am Volume 2. Craig has also recently been appointed as an executive committee member of the Australian Information Security Association. I've really been looking forward to speaking with Craig as I know so little about cyber world, and I imagine I'm not alone. So welcome, Craig, and thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's awesome to be here, and I look forward to the chat.
Firstly, congratulations on the books. A Hacker I Am and A Hacker I Am Volume 2 have done exceptionally well. A Hacker I Am has been listed at number 9 on Amazon Kindle for paperback and number 20 for Kindle for the hot new releases. And I believe both books are listed in the top 100 cyber books. A Hacker I Am was also recently been entered into the 2020 State Library of Queensland. It's a fantastic book which can be read and enjoyed by security experts and people like me, a person with no real understanding of the cyber world. Now, as a reader, it really felt like I was having a conversation with you as the author. It was really easy to engage and keep reading. Was that your intention when writing the book?
Yeah, a little bit. I sort of wanted to make it something that was sort of something that flowed well, was nice and easy to understand, and removed as much of the technical side of things as I could, just to make it more accessible by most people and a little bit more enjoyable. And you can see that was through some of the chapters I did. It's a bit more story-like, not just technical sort of content, I suppose you would say.
Absolutely. It definitely felt like you were telling a story and, it was a two-way conversation, which is very new to me, but I actually loved it. Did you ever imagine that the books would be so successful?
To be honest, I thought I'd be lucky if I could get 50 people to read it, but yeah, it's done quite well, which is good.
Now, you made a point of saying that the books do not need to be read in chapter order, which is very uncommon for a book. But I believe this is because you were integrating articles that you'd previously written with new content. Is that the sort of way that it worked?
A little bit, yeah. It was sort of the original suggestion that I should write the articles from Amanda Jane, a colleague of mine, basically sort of brought the idea together. So it sort of started with the idea of you should write a book based on the sort of same sort of content you put in your articles. So it was sort of the initial idea. I was going to string them all together and make them in a correct sort of order. And then I decided, no, it was better just to go, hey, how about I let you read a chapter at a time in whatever order you feel like. And yeah, it sort of worked really well.
Yeah, I really liked it because you could jump around and you could sort of read one chapter and then you could, fast forward 5 and then go back and read number 4 again. So it was great. Now, I've heard you mention before that Amanda Jane Turner was quite influential in your decision to publish your first book. How important is it for you to have support from those within your industry or within your network?
I think it's good, particularly it doesn't matter in any industry, but specifically in cybersecurity, because it's kind of a small group and it's hard to sort of break into. I think that relationship and sort of connecting with your community and helping you sort of build your own network and your own ideas is very important, particularly for myself. And as I've already said, it was Amanda Jane, one of my colleagues, was the sort of initial idea to do the book. So I probably never would have done that without that kind of interaction with the community. So yeah, I think it's very important.
So has she asked for a cut from the sales of the books yet?
No, she kind of just brushes over it every time I mention it. So she just said, yeah, it's all my idea. But yeah, it was definitely the initial thought was from her. So.
Now, one of the reasons that I really loved reading this book was that you tried so hard to have people within your industry collaborate and come up with the solutions to the problems that you're talking about. Now, do you think that this is critical for not only just your industry in cybersecurity, but for our country to prepare for cyber warfare?
I think so, yeah. I sort of up until now, we've been trying to sort of succeed in sort of protecting all the networks, which, to be honest, we're not doing that well at. I think we can do a lot better. And I think if we can bring all the different ideas from different people and collaborate, we will have a better chance, I guess, as sort of succeeding in that sort of cyber war, as they say. But yeah, definitely, if we can collaborate, bring each other's ideas, because everyone has a different way of they do things, a different idea of what could work and what couldn't work. I definitely don't have all the answers, and I think if we can, everyone's sort of the same. If we can all come together, I think that'll be much better, and we definitely have a better chance to succeed.
So, how much of a concern is it when the criminals are able to collaborate more effectively than the industry professionals that are engaged to stop them?
It's a little sad when you put it that way, but it's true. It's pretty common that they are better at the collaboration than we are. They all work together. They share their tools. They most of the time they sell their tools, but they're still sharing them, and they are more successful than we are at defending. The only bonus they have is, well, they only need to get it right once, basically, to succeed. We need to get it right a million times to stop them. So that's one advantage they have. But yeah, definitely they get it much better than we do. So.
Now, our conversation is quite timely given the recent cyber attack on Australia. And the Prime Minister gave a very swift and I believe unprecedented press conference, as it was, air quotes, in the interest of the public. Now, I don't believe much information was or has yet been provided as to the nature of the attacks or who was behind them, but it really put cybercrime into the forefront of people's minds, if not just for a fleeting moment. Did the government respond as swiftly at the end of 2018 to the very large-scale and successful attack by China, where they allegedly targeted international MSPs in order to gain access to their customers' systems and data?
I think it was definitely unprecedented. It's something that never really seen before. I think the generalized sort of attacks, particularly from China or one of the sort of state-sponsored APTs, because we're not 100% sure it was China on this incident, but the MSP one was confirmed, I believe, that it was China-based. But yeah, it's definitely unusual. It's not something they would normally publicly announce like that. So I think, yeah, it's a little unusual. And I think, yeah, it's not something we'd sort of see too often. I think it's probably related to some of the other back and forths that the two countries are doing more recently. That's probably prompted that kind of a sort of open and public response. But to be honest, that sort of attack is pretty common. We see that sort of stuff all the time. So in the cyber industry, it's nothing unusual. It's probably increased a little bit since the sort of start of COVID stuff. But yeah, generally it's normal, everyday, business as usual type stuff for us. It's just that announcement, which was the unusual thing. But yeah, the 2017 or 18, I think the MSP one was, they did bring in some sort of programs to try and help the MSPs, but it sort of never went too far. I think they probably could have done a little bit more, but there's always a work in progress. It doesn't matter sort of what response we give or what response they give. I think there's always more we can do. So,
because there's actually been quite a few high-profile cyber attacks recently. There was an attack that halted line production of milk and beer, which I truly believe only upset people that the production of 4X Gold beer would be halted. Because there was also one on BlueScope Steel, which they were hit, but without the real fanfare. There was the ASX announcement, but that's probably, about it. And it didn't really hit the papers or sort of go from there. So how much more prevalent do you think that the cyber attacks are becoming, and how at risk is the Australian government and Australian business?
I think the levels of attack have certainly increased. And I think they've always been there, probably just at a slightly larger level. And I think the media is sort of definitely helping by sort of bringing the profile up a little bit with some of these attacks. But you're right, the SteelScope one was kind of just brushed away. No one really sort of paid much attention. But the 4X, because everyone was worried about the beer, was kind of highlighted pretty promptly everywhere. But apparently they didn't really affect their supply, which is great, I guess. But yeah, I think the level of attacks is definitely increasing over time. And I think it's something that every business really needs to sort of at least get the basics right, make sure they cover sort of the basic patching and basic sort of at least get a decent antivirus and use two-factor authentication and just some general training for staff. But yeah, it's definitely not going away, and I definitely think there's going to be need for a lot more focus on it to sort of protect everyday businesses, particularly with the government side of things. I think they are going to become a bigger and bigger target as sort of things move on. So I think, yeah, they've definitely got to keep pushing forward and making sure they do a bit more in that sort of space.
Because it's concerning that countries of the G20 agreed back in 2015 to refrain from all cyber-related theft, with a statement reaffirmed by China and Australia bilaterally in 2017. Now, are you surprised that this agreement has not been upheld?
To be honest, no. I think those pieces of paper that they sign, I think, are a little worthless. I think it's just a publicity thing for everybody just to say, hey, we're not going to attack each other, but everyone does it. I think Australia does it to other countries. They just don't really openly say it. I think China and Russia are probably the bigger offenders in those sort of attacks, but everybody does it. I think it's would be ignorant to say that we didn't, but yeah, definitely. I'm not surprised.
Because we all know that there's state-based hacking groups and, every country spies on one another. And as you said, Australia is no exception, and I 100% believe that. So do you think that we have the right as Australians to get upset when we're the target, when we tend to turn a blind eye when we're the perpetrators?
Honestly, I think no, we don't really have a right to be sort of too upset about it. I think all we need to do as a country and then as a government, I think, is just better protect ourselves. If we do it ourselves, we can't really get that cranky about somebody else doing it to us. It's back and forth. I think if we want them to stop it, we should stop it ourselves, but that's never going to happen. So yeah, we shouldn't get too upset about it, I don't think.
Absolutely. Now, many people may not be aware of Australia's Assistance and Access Bill 2018, which allows access into encrypted sites such as WhatsApp, Wickr, iMessage, and Snapchat. Now, I wasn't aware until I started reading your book and researching cyber security. And you've raised concerns that allowing backdoor access to the government's inevitability allows unauthorized access to malicious actors in previously reasonable secure systems, and ask who will honestly and ethically manage the access to ensure it's handled correctly. Could you just talk us through that in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, basically what they did, they put in a law basically to allow them to request access to any encrypted app. Australia was the first. I think the US is doing one very similar right now. What it does is pretty much allows them for any of your secure apps is to go to that company and say, I want access to this person's details, and they can pretty much get access to everything. Some of the companies are still, I suppose you would say, holding out and not giving that kind of access, which is great. Even though, yes, the same sort of apps that secure us can help secure the bad guys, I think our privacy itself is probably a little more important than giving that sort of access. But there's that sort of argument whether it's our privacy, lack of privacy, I suppose you would say, is worth the reduction to sort of give them that access and catch the terrorists and things like that. So there's definitely an argument on both sides of whether it's worth it or not, but it's something that they've probably been doing for quite a long time. They're just being more public about it now. I think we should just, I suppose, go with the fact that we don't have much privacy anymore, and we've just got to try and keep it as secure as we can. But yeah, just know the fact that, yeah, they can pretty much see everything they want whenever they want.
It's quite scary in effect. And I think, talking about sort of just having to move forward, COVID-19 has really seen a push towards remote working and a cashless society. Now, how much easier does it make for cyber attackers to destroy a country when people aren't using cash? Obviously, then it's all relied on technology. And when everybody seems to be working from home with, I would imagine, a lot of unsecure networks.
It definitely, in my opinion, makes it a little bit easier for the malicious actors too, particularly when you're talking about the remote workers. Most home users are using their own machines, so a lot of them probably aren't updated very often, aren't patched. Quite a few of them I've seen that sort of the recent weeks don't even have antivirus or anything like that. So I'd say they're the easier targets to sort of infect and then spread their sort of access across into their organization's network and their emails and things like that. So I think the remote work definitely brings a new heightened level of risk for organizations. I think with the cashless society, it has its benefits and it has its weaknesses on both sides of that, particularly when you're talking about the apps on your phones where you've got your just like you do with the cashless and the touchless sort of payments on your cards and things like that. Some of those apps could be exploited and they can take an extra $20 every time you scan something or things like that. So there's definitely risks. I think all they would technically have to do is bring down the banking system and the system would fall over. So there's certainly risks. I think it's a 50-50 whether it's better or worse on the cashless side. But I personally like to still have a little bit of money. You never know when they don't sort of work. So I might be a little paranoid, but that's okay.
I think that's a hot tip. Everyone keep a little bit of cash with them. Now, I love the word malicious actors, and you speak a lot about the difference between hackers and cyber criminals in your book. What role do you think the media should take in changing the public's perception of the hooded criminal hunched over a computer in a dark room, and as you say in your book, with the gloves on, to the reality that cybercrime is at many times at the direction of large crime syndicates, with many of the cyber criminals that are caught and charged and potentially jailed being so low down on the totem pole they can barely survive, with, as you talk about, some being forced against their will to participate, especially in countries like Russia and the Ukraine.
Yeah, you're definitely right. Like it is that kind of, that's the realistic structure. Particularly, I think with the whole hacker hoodie and the wearing the gloves thing. I was having a bit of a poke at the media a little bit, I suppose you would say, in that sort of one. But yeah, that is their standard depiction. They use it probably because most people know what that is. They instantly look at it and they see it and they go, "Oh, I know what that is," and it's sort of an instant reaction to it. I think they do need to try and pull away from that a little bit and start being a little bit more realistic with what a malicious actor is, or a cyber criminal, depending on the way you want to put it. I think they're both better terms than a hacker when they're talking about this sort of malicious activity. Because like you said, I technically am sort of pointed out as being a hacker, but because I do pen testing work during sort of my day job. So, and a hacker can be someone that's next door, can be your uncle, your auntie, it could be anyone, and they're just normal people. Basically, the term is just someone that likes to manipulate something to do something it wasn't originally designed for. That is kind of what a hacker means. So I think their depiction of it as the bad guy, I think, is a little wrong, and I think they could definitely change that. And you can tell with my book that I kind of pull away from that sort of scenario, and I poke a bit of fun and say they should change that out, which I think they should. I think they should start to use the more correct terms and find some other way to display them that everyone recognizes. But yeah, that it probably won't go away, no matter how much I blow hot hair about it, I suppose you would say. They'll still use the same hacker hoodie look.
I do think that we need to sort of maybe pass your book on to the government to have them read that, because even within their press conference, they sort of talked about cyber criminals, and then I actually think they used the word malicious attackers, and then they, went back to hackers and, really sort of forced that. So it would be great for them to read that and notice the change in that. Because you call yourself an ethical hacker, which I also love.
Yes.
That's brilliant. Now, I was astounded at the money paid to cyber criminals each year, which I believe over $1.5 trillion was paid in 2018 alone. Now, I have really limited knowledge of the dark web and how payments are made, but around $860 billion was paid via the dark web and the rest by other means. So if an organisation's asked to pay a ransom to get back access of their IT systems, how do the payments actually get made, and is there a way of tracking those malicious actors via the payments?
Most of those are sort of by your Bitcoin and or your cryptocurrency type sort of payments now, which they've tried to use methods to sort of track them before, but because of the level of encryption and security involved in those sort of currencies, it's pretty hard. And even the government uses services, what they call washing services. So they will go through probably hundreds and hundreds of Bitcoin accounts or one of those other cryptocurrency accounts, and it basically gets run through so many they can't tell where it was by the time it gets to the end. So the money is clean. It's the simplest way to launder money these days. They don't have to go through too much effort these days. It's just a system that does it for them automatically, and they just take a cut, whoever does the washing of the money. So yeah, basically once it's paid, it's gone. You'll never find it again.
That's amazing. I'm not that up on Bitcoin. Like, I know a bit about it. I'm still trying to get my head around the mining of data and things like that.
I'm a bit skeptical, to be honest.
But when these ransoms are paid and demanded, I suppose, how involved do the police get, and how advanced are our police at looking into cyber criminals?
Generally, with most of the ransomware sort of payments, a lot of the time it's not even looked in at all by the police. Most companies will just pay the ransomware, unlock their data and get it back. Obviously, there is particular agencies and stuff through the Joint Cybersecurity Centre and ASD that will do investigations through via the police force and other sort of agencies, but generally they don't get involved, particularly with ransomware, too much. They will get involved with breaches because it does require notification now if a company's been breached, but a lot of the time it's not something they would get involved too much with. I think they could probably be a little bit more involved, but yeah, millions of them a day, I would say. So it's quite a big job, something for them to sort of dig their way out of, I guess, the sort of the legal people. So yeah, it's not a job I would like to go through all the time. But yeah, that involvement, particularly with ransomware, not too much. But yeah, they do get quite a lot more in breaches and those sort of things.
So just touching quickly on breaches. So is it a requirement for every organisation to report on a breach, or is it only, and what sort of breach has to occur before you have to notify anybody?
There is some exclusions, I believe, for the legal requirement to notify. I think it comes down to revenue and a few other components to do with the business itself. You can go to get some legal advice on that sort of thing. But generally speaking, you need to do a notification though when it's sensitive data belonging to anyone that would have details on your system. So your clients or customers or suppliers, things like that. So like date of births, credit card numbers, addresses, things like that. So if any of that kind of information is likely to have been taken or accessed, then a breach notification is required. But if nothing is taken and nothing was accessed and you can prove that, then no sort of notification is required. Yeah, it's a bit hard to tell sometimes these days. Most of the time they will notify anyway just to be on the safe side. And then it's will come down to a decision in the end of reasonable belief whether something was taken or not, whether you have to do a public notification or not, like a lot of them do. It's a bit hard to tell. It's a bit of a fine line whether you class it as something that's notifiable or not. But yeah, it comes down to a few of those things. Just, yeah, particularly sensitive data, though, is where I normally point to. If any possibility it was taken, then yeah, definitely a notification required.
So do you think, given the lack of police involvement, though, in cases like this, do you think there's companies out there that just don't notify because they probably won't get caught for not notifying anyway?
I think particularly with breaches, some of the smaller companies that don't know they're required to may not. They can get in quite a lot of trouble if they don't, so they should. But particularly with the sensitive data and the breach notification stuff, the police will usually get involved in that side of thing. But if it's just ransomware, where it's just encrypted, normally they won't. It's just recover. Either you pay the ransomware or you don't. I usually say don't unless you really, really have to. Basically, it's just a cycle. They will keep coming back and doing it again. So that's what backups are good for. Just make sure your backups are right, recover, and try and move on and sort of fix whatever the issue was that got them in there in the first place. But yeah, it's quite normal. It's kind of sad. But yeah, definitely don't pay unless you have to. That's my advice on that one.
Perfect. Advice from the expert. Love that. Now, I don't want to give too much away from your book, as I really think that everybody should read it, especially those social media oversharers. Because, as you say, an attack can be based entirely on information found on social media profiles. And you also discuss the other side of technological advances, which certainly made me look at things a lot different. So, can you just talk us through a little bit about that?
Yeah, with the particularly about the social media overshares, definitely a lot of my sort of ethical hacking engagements where I was sort of doing the pen testing work where you would be sort of approached and asked to sort of attack a client's systems like as if I was a malicious actor. What my first thing is you would go through is what they call information gathering, where I would find everybody I could that works for the company on any social media platforms, gather information about their kids' names, their cats, their dogs, anything I could that would most likely be used as passwords, because that's pretty much normally what they are, which is kind of sad, but it is. So yeah, pretty much everything that most people share on social media could give me straight access to any of their accounts. It's pretty easy to put through first name, last name email addresses or first name email addresses. So you've got the usernames usually pretty quickly, and then just start stringing together a few of their kids' names, their date of birth, everything that they keep sharing. When they're on holidays, when you can go and try and have a bit more access on their account because they've told you they're not at the office. So it's that they give it away pretty well, which is a little sad, but makes it a bit too easy sometimes.
Absolutely. It's really scary that, I'm not normally on social media, but, not necessarily because of, fear of cyber criminals. But after reading that, I was like, I do not want to be on social media at all.
Surprisingly, I am a little bit, which is, considering what I just said, it's a bit surprising. But yeah, I don't share that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, absolutely. You know how to do it safely. Now, you're one of the judges for the 2020 AWSN Women in Security Award, and you talk a lot about diversity within your industry, which I find fantastic. But what I really love is that you talk more to the diversity of skill sets and providing opportunity for those without the minimum number of years experience or the elusive piece of paper, as opposed to gender and race, which is more often discussed. Why is such a broad interpretation of diversity important to you and your industry?
me particularly, I sort of feel that diversity, like you said, needs to be that sort of more broad discussion, I think, particularly in cybersecurity, because we need so many different views of the same problem to figure out the best way forward. I think we need the different backgrounds, we need the different cultures, we need the male, female, different sort of backgrounds, as in work history. So if you people from psychology, different accountants, everyone will look at the same sort of cybersecurity problem in a completely different way. And the way I look at it might be the wrong way. Someone from a psychology background might look at it somewhere different and they go, hang on, this might work. And it could be the perfect answer. So I think it doesn't matter of your education level, your background, your culture, male, female. I think everyone can bring something to it and could be that sort of missing link we might need to win that sort of cyber war or win the battle against sort of protecting the systems. We may have been looking at it completely wrong since cybersecurity really started. So I think if anyone from any sort of background can bring something new and some sort of new way to look at it, I think that's why we need to sort of push that diversity and sort of have that broader conversation and not just about male and female. I think it shouldn't matter whether we're male and female to start with. I think there's more to it.
Now, you've worked in the industry for 14 years and then you still found it difficult to get the roles that you were capable of doing because you just didn't have the degree. And it really bothered you that you didn't have that piece of paper. So, how hard is it to progress within your industry without the degree or any industry qualifications?
I think particularly in cybersecurity, I think it's really, really hard to get in, qualifications or no qualifications. Once you're in the door, it's usually a good place to stay and you can usually progress pretty well, but it's getting that first initial sort of opportunity to come through and get that sort of security role. And I've sort of seen that same sort of wall that everyone keeps hitting, and I hit it quite a few times myself trying to get into a specific cybersecurity only role. So I don't understand, like with the advertising and stuff like that for jobs and things like that, they all want the 5 years of experience for a job that's a starter job. It just does not make sense to me at all. They need to be a bit more realistic and help people come through and sort of give them those sort of skills. Because me personally, I think that the attitude and the way you think is more important than the actual skills. We can teach the skills. That's something we can sort of work on. But if you don't have that sort of right mindset or the right sort of attitude towards it, then that's the only things I think is important, is that attitude and that mindset. So the elusive pieces of paper are a little painful, but and it doesn't matter whether you have them or you don't have them. I think they help, but the expectations are sometimes a little unrealistic, I guess the word would be.
But you went on to study 2 master's degrees with
Yes.
Charles Sturt University.
Crazy.
Now you study definitely. You studied a Master of Information Security, a Master of Information System Security, IT Security, Cyber Security, and then a Master's of Management Information Technology with Digital Forensics Information System Security. So you obviously felt that bit of paper, you needed that or you wanted to sort of show it. But that's 6 years of back-to-back study. So do you think it really was I'll show you, or was it something that you needed to do to be able to get the roles that you deserved?
It probably was a little bit of the whole I'll show you kind of thing. To me, it was a little bit more than that. I always thought I probably would get one. I just didn't think it was something that was necessary. It was, to me, more about broadening my sort of skill sets, because I was good with the technical and the hands-on, but I wanted to grow sort of my management abilities and my sort of, I suppose you would say, my communications and skills, which is what I think I grew most with doing the degrees. Yes, I got the formal qualifications in sort of your IT management with the digital forensics and the cybersecurity side of things, which is great because I have the piece of paper now. But I think to me, that's what I got most out of it, was made me, I suppose, the writer I am today. I never thought that I would sort of do that sort of writing. So I think the growth personally is a good thing. I don't know if it was 6 years was worth it, and it's certainly not cheap, but definitely enjoyed the process. I think it took a long time. I don't know why I signed up for the second one, but I did, and I quite enjoyed both. I learned a lot from doing it. I think the one I did particularly was good because it had a bit of a combination of both your university style units as well as the industry style units. So it was a bit of both. So I had a foot in both camps, I guess you would say. So I think that was probably a benefit to me. But it's a long time and a lot to get a piece of paper. But it's like that hold my beer thing, and off you go get it. I'm going to prove it now, kind of thing. So, but it probably was. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, 6 years is a very long time. So how hard was it to balance career, study, and your family?
A nightmare, to be honest. It was a juggle. Some nights, it was 1 or 2 o'clock in the night doing assessments and things like that, and then off to work the next day. But was pretty full on at times. So I'm not sure I'd sort of rush to do it again too often. But it was it was good, but yeah, definitely a juggle.
I think it's easier to look back once you've finished and go, yeah, I dealt with it okay, but probably during the time it's a lot more difficult.
Pulling your hair out, yes, definitely.
Absolutely. Now, there's quite a few qualifications available to IT and security professionals like yourself, including on the job experience. Do you think there's a right balance that hiring managers and organizations and also the applicants should aim for, especially given the skills shortage in your sector?
I think it is a bit of a juggle, and it depends on the hiring manager and the companies too, because you'll get some that love only the industry related certifications and some that will only hire if you have the academic certification. So I think they need to get somewhere on the right page, somewhere in the middle. I think a combination is good, but I do think a lot of the time they put too much emphasis on those qualifications. I think they should focus more, like the discussion we're having with the diversity stuff, and more about the attitude and their abilities as a person to be able to get those sort of skills we need, particularly because we need so many more in the industry now. And we don't really have time for everyone to do 6 years of degrees to come up with the same sort of qualifications. So I think, yeah, they need to probably find a way to give it a more of an industry starting position and help some people come through and sort of give that mentoring and bit of focus that way instead of all on the certificates and the qualifications. Yes, by all means, help them go through that process once they've got their foot in the door. But I think, yeah, they need to sort of pull back from that a little bit. I definitely think the qualifications, depending on the job they want to go to, has some merit and some benefit. But yeah, I don't think that should be the focus point for them when they're hiring staff. I think that's just a bonus if the staff have some.
So, how much of a role do you think on the job experience plays? Do you think that it's from your experience that you've seen people are much more successful if they've been able to work within the industry, get that industry experience, and then go on and get those qualifications, or not even get them down the track, but just have on the job experience?
I think particularly like cybersecurity, I think from the people that are sort of colleagues I've interacted with, a lot of them don't have many sort of cyber related sort of qualifications, whether it's degrees or industry certifications. You'll see some that have hundreds of them that just sort of like to collect them like badges or something. But a lot of the really successful ones don't have a lot of certifications. They'll get your, like say I did, they get a formal degree and then they don't do too many other industry certifications, or they will do your main few industry certifications and then that's about it. And you'll see a lot of them don't have any at all, like you said. So I think it's not really necessary. And I think as long as you have that sort of right mindset again, I think, yeah, I think we can go a lot further that way. Yeah, I think it's a bit of a hard line because they say they want them, they say they need them, and everyone sort of goes to get them to meet that sort of need. So it's trying to find that sort of step backwards and sort of go, do we really need these qualifications or is this really a requirement? But I think, yeah, there's benefits to have them, but I don't think they're be all and end all, that's for sure.
From an outsider looking in, we look at cybersecurity and we go, wow, exciting. So much stuff must happen every day. In your book, you talk about the roles that can be very mundane, there's long hours, and it can be really detrimental to a person's well-being. Most people wouldn't necessarily associate a high mental health prevalence with the IT and security industry. But the average CISO has just a 2-year shelf life, which is really not long given the amount of years that we're expected to work within our lives. Now, you say that this is exacerbated by a skills shortage. So do you think the government should provide more funding to this sector, similar to what they propose to, say, nursing?
I think it definitely wouldn't hurt. I think they could definitely help, and they are trying to start sort of to help do that sort of arrangements now and help funding and create some of those cybersecurity centers. So they're trying to do the right direction. I think they could probably do a little bit more. But yeah, like you said, the 2-year shelf life for a CISO is scary when you think about it. It's 10 years of learning to become a CISO, and then you'll be lucky if you can stay in that top job for 2 years. It's kind of a ridiculous kind of point of view when you look at it, but it is true. And it's really to do with the amount of sort of stress. I've seen CISOs don't normally look like they're having too much of a fun time a lot of the time. So they're the ones that would wear any sort of breaches or incidents. And because of the level of them happening and the amount of responsibility, they do burn out pretty quickly. And you'll see them 60 hours a week, 80 hours a week, even more a lot of the time, trying to make sure it's all coming together and being looked after. So it's a little scary when you think about it, but yeah, it's more common than you would think. They say that's a pretty specific sort of a time frame, 2 to 4 years. So
That's absolutely crazy to think that someone could spend 10 years worth of studying and working to be in a top job for 2 years. It's that absolutely
Ridiculous,
blew
isn't
my
it?
mind. It's absolutely ridiculous. I couldn't believe it. But you've said that you were inspired to talk about mental health because of the work that Simon Harvey does within your industry. Could you talk a little bit about what Simon does?
Sort of, I've seen a couple of he likes to talk at some of our sort of industry events and things like that. He's quite a great guy. What he does is he shares his own sort of personal demons and what he's sort of gone through, and sort of brings out that whole idea of we need to talk about it more with each other, and sort of not just be blokes a lot of the time, or girls that just put up with it and just sort of not say anything to anyone and just sort of keep it on ourselves, that we need to share and we need to get it out and try and help extend that whole 2 year shelf life. It's not for us just to sit there and wear it all. We sort of share the load a little bit, talk about our issues, and if we're stressing out. And yeah, he's pretty good. And I love the fact that how he draws it back to his own sort of personal sort of issues and occurrences and things he's been through himself, and he sort of brings out his own demons and shares them with everybody, which can be quite scary. And I do a little bit of the same sort of stuff as well. I try and use my own personal things to sort of bring it out in my sort of, I think that's why usually my sort of books and the articles and stuff are more conversational and personal. I try and pull people in with my personal stuff as well, which is hard to share, but I think yeah, Simon does it very, very well. Great guy, and I think he's doing a great job, and I see him quite a lot, and it's yeah, does a good job.
You do talk a little bit about in your book where you do sort of go in to share a little bit, and then it seems like you do want to sort of pull back from sharing personally. Do you have a bit of a internal struggle with wanting to be able to tell your story, but then not wanting too much of yourself out there?
I think it is a little bit. I think honestly, I'm naturally an introvert, so it's which not everyone would believe when they talk to me, because I'm pretty easygoing and have a pretty sort of open conversation most of the time. But I think it is a bit of a struggle, my introvert and extrovert sides, to sort of try and share that sort of story. But I think my natural cybersecurity self wants to go, no, don't share too much, don't share too much. But then, like, no, I need to, kind of thing. So yeah, definitely a bit of an internal struggle sometimes. But I think, just personally, I think that's the best way to help educate everyone else on sort of the topics and sort of my experiences. It just show a little bit of myself and sort of share that out there, and yeah, make it easier for everybody else so they don't make some of the mistakes that I did on the way.
I think it was a great way to connect with the reader, to be able to sort of share, and also for the reader to be able to understand that you weren't necessarily comfortable with sharing everything, because not everybody's always comfortable with sharing a lot about themselves. So I really found that to be a real drawing card for me to be able to read it, to go, I completely felt aligned with the way that you were feeling. So
It's good.
not all of
Good.
us want to be
Makes you
out
feel
there
better.
and sharing everything. Yeah, exactly. So I really liked it. You're the unit coordinator now, you've got a new role for the cybercrime and social engineering unit at Western Sydney University. Most people have a small idea about what cybercrime really is, but could you tell us a bit about what social engineering is all about?
So social engineering specifically is probably more, I would say, the human side of cybersecurity, and probably these days is probably the biggest security threat, and way malicious actors would probably gain access to systems. It can be done in sort of a few different ways. You can do personal conversations over the phone, things like that. They can sort of manipulate the conversations to get access to things or passwords and make it sound like they are a real IT support person or something like that. Or you've got your sort of email-based phishing sort of emails where you get your scam emails, where they will say the more lame ones are probably the Nigerian Prince style ones, where they say, I have all these millions of dollars and I'm going to give it to you if you give me this $200 gift card from somewhere. They're the more a little bit sort of entertaining ones. But yeah, you get the really good ones where they will use email conversations to manipulate somebody to change bank account details, that they want something paid into a new account or something like that. But yeah, it's basically the human side and the manipulation of people's good nature to want to help, which is pretty much what it is. They sort of manipulate everyone's kind-heartedness. Most people just want to help. They'll ring up and you'll say, look, I need you to help me this. I'm really urgent. And most people go, okay, I'll just help you out. I don't want to drag my feet. I want to be a good person here. That's what we've been brought up to do, is be well-mannered people. So yeah, they take advantage of that side of us, and yeah, they're quite successful at it. So
there's obviously a lot of successful cybercrime that goes on, just with the money that we were talking about earlier. But there's so many scam sort of emails that come through, and you can just clearly tell that they are scam emails. Do people really get caught out with those, especially in Australia, or do you think we're a little bit more savvy here in Australia that, we can sort of spot things from a mile off, and there's only the more sophisticated ones where they really are preying on our psyche, I suppose, to be able to get us to help?
I'd like to say we don't fall for them. I think we're getting better. I think a lot of people went through sort of the security awareness training and the fact that cybersecurity is very out in front of everybody now, that people are getting better at them. But I think there's sort of been a bit of debate with some colleagues about whether they did it deliberately, this bad spelling and things like that, to try and weed out the ones that would be a bit too skeptical to actually fall for them to start with.
Yep.
Or whether they're just bad spellers. I think it's probably sometimes a little bit of both, but the argument actually is that they deliberately do it to then sort of get them through the door, and then those people that would not sort of pick up that sort of issue in the email to start with are more likely to go through and follow through and change bank account details or click on links or open things. So I wish we wouldn't fall for them all, but yeah, too many do, so it's quite common. And I'd like to say that we're better at it, but we're not. We've still got a lot of work to do, but yeah, but definitely they're getting better, particularly with your banking intimidated, like sort of ones where they try and make it look exactly like the same formatting, the same templates and things like that. They are getting a lot better, but you still get millions of your very badly written one, very badly spelled ones, and a lot of people still fall for them. I don't know how they still fall for them, but they still do. And it's easy to say from my perspective because I know exactly what they look like and what they are. So, but traditionally, yeah, people are still falling for them thousands and thousands a day. So yeah, we got more work to do, I think. But
now, when you go through and you're doing, your sort of ethical hacking, do you sort of have a little bit of a chuckle in the background to about, not necessarily about the people, but to the things that people fall for?
probably a little, to be honest. If I'm honest, sometimes you think, no one's going to fall for this, and then you see someone and they fall for it, and you're like, really? I made that kind of obvious that you wouldn't fall for it, particularly when you do sort of like your scam email sort of simulation stuff. I usually make them so that you can see the points if you've paid attention in any of the awareness trainings I've done or anything like that for the companies. And I make the obvious domain so it looks something completely silly that they'll go, oh, hang on, that's not right. Or, something that identifies it as really bad, and you sit there and go, no, that's not even close. I don't even use that software or something like that. But they still fall for them. So yeah, sadly, yes, there is the odd chuckle moment. We try not to, because it's all about a learning process. Everyone's got to learn. Some things they shouldn't do, but they do.
So I suppose there's a lot more work to be done on the social engineering side of cybercrime then.
I think so. I think particularly the human element on that social engineering stuff, I think, is probably where a lot of the focus needs to be. And then probably just getting companies to do the simple stuff right. Forget all the big fancy flashy like new technologies and things like that. Just get backups working properly, get updates so that the latest security patches are on systems, and just do the basics right and teach people how to pick up the scams, and we'll be all a lot more secure.
Now, I did want to ask you, I was going to ask you offline, but I want to ask you now, what is a good antivirus software for people to have?
Depends on what it's for. There is quite a few sort of your big business sort of style stuff. There's like things like your Carbon Black and your FireEye and things like that. But for a home user, your Trend and your Symantec are still probably your sort of higher end ones. The free one that you even get with Microsoft now, if you actually keep it updated, is reasonable. It's certainly not going to stop any sort of advanced hackers, but it's still better than having nothing and not updating them. But yeah, they're all kind of the same these days. There's nothing that really stands out. There's no silver bullet, as they like to put it, that will protect you from everything. But yeah, definitely have something. Anything is better than nothing. So put something on there.
Lesson to everyone. Put something. It's just that just actually popped up on my screen. Mine is running out, about to expire.
Update that.
Exactly. I need to do that. Note to self. Now, what's the next step for you, Craig?
I think keep progressing, keep sort of developing more my sort of technical security wise. I really like the pen testing side of things and the sort of incident response side. So I think that's probably my direction where I'll head off. I do enjoy the teaching side of things, which I'm doing with the cybercrime unit. So I'll probably still do a little bit of that part-time as well, because I like the fact that I can pass on some of that knowledge to students coming through. I think that's a good way to give back a little bit. But yeah, I assume I'll probably still write some more stuff, so you'll still see more of that. So, but yeah, no specific direction at this stage. I think, yeah, definitely more cybersecurity and more writing. But yeah, time will see, I suppose.
Fantastic. I could probably talk to you all day, because I have to say, after reading your books, I feel like a little bit of a security expert myself sometimes. I've been trying to educate everybody else on it. And, with my, they say a little bit of information sometimes dangerous. I think I'm a little bit dangerous at the moment. But before I let you go, I've got one final question for you. What would you do differently if only you knew?
Good question. I like that question. I think for me personally, I probably would have made a push towards cybersecurity a lot earlier from the standard sort of IT sort of area. I think it's my sort of passion. I sort of, as soon as I sort of started doing anything in cybersecurity, I sort of got the bug, and that was where I wanted to go from there on. So I think I probably would have made a bit of a change earlier, and I would have maybe written some books earlier possibly. But yeah, I think, just pushing into that cybersecurity definitely would have been an earlier choice. If I'd known, I would have liked it so much. So yeah, I think that's probably the only thing I really would have changed. Everything else is good so far. Just maybe an earlier entry. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today, Craig. I really appreciate it.
No worries at all. It's been great.
And if you want to know more about Craig, you can follow him on all the socials. I really highly recommend Craig's books, A Hacker I Am and A Hacker I Am Volume 2. And I'll have links to both of these books, all his socials, and a full bio on Craig on our website, ifonlyyouKnewpodcast.com.au. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
For more information about our guests or our show, visit ifonlyyouKnewpodcast.com.au.